Welcome to this explainer. If you were online during the second week of June 2026, you witnessed something entirely unprecedented in the tech world. We literally saw the launch of a true frontier model, a totally paradigm-shifting artificial intelligence, followed almost immediately by its complete and utter erasure from the internet. It was here, and then, just like that, it was gone.
72. That is exactly how many hours Anthropic's revolutionary Claude Fable 5 was alive before the US government ordered an unprecedented global shutdown. Just 72 hours. Really think about that for a second. Years of research, billions of dollars in compute power, completely locked away from the public just 3 days after launch.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the 72-hour AI ban. Let's actually just dive right into the climax here, because the timeline is absolutely staggering. On June 11th, a letter from the US government effectively erased Fable 5 and its sibling from the open web. Citing national security powers and export controls, the government straight up ordered a ban on foreign access to these models. And Anthropic's response? Swift and absolute. Rather than trying to geofence things, digitally blocking access based on where a user is physically located, which we all know can be pretty porous, the company completely shut down the models for all customers globally just to ensure compliance. That meant even Anthropic's own foreign employees were suddenly locked out. Guys, this is the first time in history that a commercial AI model already deployed to millions of people was forcibly recalled by a government order. Moving on to Section 2, enter the Mythos class. To really wrap our heads around what triggered such a massive government intervention, we gotta rewind a bit and look at the sheer paradigm-shifting power of what Anthropic dubbed the new Mythos class. The Mythos class represents a massive, massive leap over the previous Opus 4.8 generation. We aren't just talking about a model that writes slightly better emails. We're talking about autonomous capabilities that pushed the very boundaries of artificial intelligence. It was built to maintain focus across millions of tokens, essentially data points or word fragments, improve its own work using persistent notes, and tackle genuinely long-horizon complex tasks. What's super fascinating here is that Anthropic actually deployed this intelligence on two totally parallel tracks. First, you had Claude Fable 5, meant for the general public, but heavily guarded with active safety classifiers. Then, you had Claude Mythos 5. This was the exact same underlying neural network, but with its cyber safeguards completely lifted. This unchained version was strictly restricted to vetted US government cyber defenders and infrastructure providers. To give you an idea of why this was so heavily guarded, just look at its coding ability. The leap here was staggering. On SWE-Bench Pro, which basically tests an AI's ability to act as an autonomous, independent software engineer, the previous top-tier model, Opus 4.8, scored 69.2%, while Fable 5 utterly dominated the field by jumping to 80.3%. It left previous models and competitors entirely in the dust. But honestly, coding was just the tip of the iceberg. Fable 5's vision capabilities allowed it to literally rebuild complete web applications just from looking at screenshots. It even beat the video game Pokémon Fire Red from start to finish using only raw vision. No external navigation aids, just seeing and playing. And in the realm of biology, this model accelerated drug design pipelines tenfold. It even generated an entirely novel original hypothesis about an E. coli protein that was later independently corroborated by a separate lab's published study. So it wasn't just regurgitating science, it was actually conducting it. Which brings us to Section 3, Fable 5 in the wild. So what actually happens when everyday people get their hands on this kind of power? Well, for the brief 72 hours Fable 5 was public, users across the globe put it through its paces with astonishing real-world results. Over on Reddit, creative writers were absolutely blown away. One user, JohnFields_, reported that Fable 5 was finally able to flawlessly follow 130,000 words of strict formatting rules. It handled multiple passes for point of view, plot, and foreshadowing, producing highly usable prose that required minimal manual cleanup. It was a day and night difference from the previous Opus models, finally breaking through that barrier of generic AI slop that writers are always complaining about. The technical community was just as stunned, if not more so. Esteemed open-source developer Simon Willison spent 5.5 hours with Fable 5, and he literally called it a beast. He marveled at its massive internal knowledge base and watched as it autonomously rewrote major features of his open-source tools. It was generating high-quality API designs, tests, and documentation that would normally take days of human labor. And when you zoom out to the enterprise level, the results are almost unbelievable.
In early testing, the payments giant Stripe used Fable 5 to execute a migration on a massive 50 million line Ruby codebase, a task that traditionally would have required a full engineering team over 2 months to complete manually, finished by Fable 5 in a single day. 1 day. Okay, Section 4, the safety classifier fallback. Now, all of this extreme next-level intelligence, it came with a pretty massive catch. A highly unique, baked-in safety mechanism made Fable 5 completely different from its predecessors. Anthropic knew what they had built, and they knew it was risky. This right here brilliantly illustrates the tightrope they were walking. Because the model was so capable in dual-use areas, they designed a silent handoff. If you asked Fable 5 a risky question regarding cybersecurity, advanced biology, or chemistry, or, say, if you tried to use it to train a competing AI, its strict ASL3 classifiers would instantly trigger. And instead of Fable 5 answering, the query was silently routed down to the safer, less capable Opus 4.8 model. Anthropic actually reported that this fallback triggered in fewer than 5% of all sessions, meaning for 95% of users, Fable 5 ran completely unhindered. But the very existence of this mechanism was a candid, openly published admission by Anthropic that this frontier model was simply too dangerous to be left completely unchained on the open internet. Of course, all this power definitely came at a steep premium. Fable 5 doubled the cost of its predecessor. It ran at $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens. But despite the cost, power users were more than willing to pay for it, given the massive productivity gains it offered. Too bad their window to use it was rapidly closing.
And that takes us to Section 5, the sudden government shutdown. Which brings us right back to the jarring end of the Mythos class's very brief public life, that 72-hour window where the world literally got to touch the future. In a whirlwind few days, the models launched on June 9th, instantly thrilled users worldwide, and were immediately targeted by the U.S. government. At 5:21 p.m. on June 11th, the national security letter was delivered. By that night, Anthropic had pulled the plug. On June 12th, the tech world woke up to the news of the most historic AI ban ever. Now, the government obviously didn't publicly detail their exact national security concerns, but the suspected cause floating around the industry is honestly pretty chilling. Anthropic's internal understanding and the prevailing theory right now is that officials or allied cyber teams may have discovered a way to universally jailbreak Fable 5's safety classifiers. If those classifiers could be bypassed, the unchained power of the Mythos class, capable of autonomous zero-day exploits, finding and attacking unpatched software vulnerabilities, and dangerous viral design, would be freely available to absolutely anyone with an internet connection. So, as a direct result, right now, the doors are completely locked. All users have been forcefully reverted back to the Opus 4.8 workhorse. If you try to open an existing Fable 5 platform conversation today, it abruptly terminates in an error. Anthropic's developers are scrambling, but for all intents and purposes, Fable 5 is effectively gone from the public domain. So as we watch the first ever forced recall of a major commercial AI model, we're really left wondering about what happens next. The capability overhang is very real. The intelligence exists, but it's hidden behind closed doors. Will the most powerful AI tools of tomorrow be strictly locked away for government eyes only? What you should really take away from this explainer today is that the era of unfettered access to frontier models might have just ended, a mere 72 hours after it truly began. Thank you so much for joining me. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you next time.